My name is Jaffar Agha. I'm a police officer in the City of Emporia. I've been married for 6 years to my wife Carly, and we have 3 children together, my son Gregory and my daughters Amelia and Elizabeth. Well, I was born into a Muslim family. My father immigrated here from Pakistan during college. And met my mom. She born in Texas, and we grew up in the Kansas City area, in a Muslim community there. We went to the Islamic school of Greater Kansas City as a child, until eventually we left the city and we moved into a little town, Paola, Kansas. At that point, we were the only Muslim family in that small Kansas town, and I'm not sure what the right way to say it is, but kind of a disconnect with the faith. My father was very religious, but I wasn't I guess I wasn't as pious as him when it came to Islam and the faith. When I was around 13 years old, 9/11 rolls around, and that calls in a lot of things to question when you have people committing such atrocious acts in the name of Islam. And you being raised in it, even if I wasn't as devout as the others in my family, wasn't anything that we had ever been taught. It was nothing instrumental in our upbringing that anything to do with what these terrorists were doing. But you had to face ridicule and I don't even say persecution. There were plenty of high school fights or people just treating you differently growing up like that. But it certainly didn't create a very warm atmosphere being isolated like that in a small town, and not having a support system or community to kind of gather around. So I eventually, in my teen years, fell completely away from religion and considered myself an atheist or completely faithless. I think partly that was one of the reasons it kind of drew me away from that. I heard, something I see in the news is if it's nothing to do with the religion, then how come they're not condemning them? In the communities I grew up in, there was a lot of condemnation for those acts. But it was at the same time, there's not just a few, there was a lot of these people rallying behind Islam as a calling cry for violence, and that's just something that just didn't jive with me. And it just I think it probably put a little bit of a wedge in there. And then I wanted to call myself a logical and reasonable person. I'm a very skeptical person. So faith takes faith. And for someone who's very skeptical and they don't want to invest that belief into something, then it's easy to just say, it's probably not real. I came to school here at Emporia State University. It was a smaller community, but I would say that starting out in the art department, there was a lot more, I would say, liberalism. You get people from all kinds of walks of life. I met farmers' kids who had a real strong rural connection, and they were doing, painting classes. And then I met people who would get along with the most alternative Portlanders. And they were the same. So I had a big or diverse community in the college which I could communicate with and interact with, and I had a lot of people who I would say were pretty faithless or very openly atheist, and it played a little bit into, okay, so that's a thing. I came from a very religious family. It wasn't a thing. It was actually something to be very reviled, and so them being open about it, I thought, okay, I can do that too. If you see a lot of atheist internet forums where they talk about things, there is typically a lot of hate, discord against Christians, and I think most of that is because they were ex-Christian or they grew up in a Christian household, and so that's who they were essentially rebelling against. For me, mine really was more directed at my own past as being a Muslim. I would see the hypocrisy and, professing one thing and then acting a different way. And I didn't really have a lot of hate. I guess I did probably take plenty of part ridiculing anybody who believed in a supernatural being or any kind of organized religion. I think there was a part of me that wanted to fit in with that atheist community, and so while I would say there is no God, I think it was more akin to rebelling against. And someone has to, at their core, believe that there is something if they're going to rebel against it. You don't rebel against nothing. So at my deepest core, I've always been exposed to a religion, and so I would say I was probably closer to agnostic than a true atheist. So there was a few things. Working as a police officer, there was no shortage of times where things can get kind of hairy, a little dicey. There were a few specific instances where I had probably a close brush with death. I was T-boned at full speed on a 35-mile-an-hour road, and as I was crossing the intersection, and I walked away from that with a bruise, and the side of my car that got hit was really bad. And then there was another instance where I was literally chasing a drug dealer after he ran from a car stop and ended up striking a metal cable that was in the dark with my head and falling down, and I was unconscious for it was probably closer to 3 minutes with this kind of dangerous, violent person lurking around with my helpless body just right there on the ground. And so it I think it shook me and said that there's something looking out for me at this point. It wasn't very far after that, or very long after that I started talking to a coworker about what he believes. I always known this guy to be a very religious person. He would openly talk about it if you brought the subject up to him. And of course, trying to be an atheist, there was no shortage of times I would try to lure him into an argument or debate with him. And so, I earnestly asked him. At this point in my life, I had 2 kids, and wanting to be a good father and feeling something missing from my life that I had once when I was younger, kind of that community wholeness. I started talking to him about what he did. There has been a few occasions that I did, or I have. I had an unattended death. I went to the family's home, and while I was there, I saw some calendars distributed by our church and lots of iconography, the Virgin Mary. And so, I asked them if there's anybody we can contact, and she said that she had all the family contacted, and I said, as I usually ask, is there a clergyman that I can contact for you, something of that nature? And so they asked if we could have the priest come by. I was able to reach Father Farrar very early in the morning, and I can tell you he's not a morning person. He did not quite recognize that it was me on the phone when I introduced myself and asked if he would come by to pray with the family. But he showed up, and I actually took part praying with the family there. And I think it was probably good for them that there was someone else willing to, share their grief with and be part of their community in that little time where they had lost somebody. I started speaking with who would later become my godfather during my conversion process. I started telling my wife that I was going to be attending these classes on Thursday nights, the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults. And I think at first, my wife's known me for a very long time. We've been married for 6 years here the last couple weeks. And then we knew each other for several years before that. So the last 10 years, she's known me to be someone who jumps headfirst into things and then doesn't follow through with them. And I think for a while, that was what she kind of took my behavior as. And so it was kind of more of an annoyance to her that I was leaving her and the kids all alone to do something on my own every week, and never does she get a chance to leave the house by herself with a breastfeeding child and the two other kids. And so I think at first she was a little resentful. We did talk about it here more recently before the baptism, and she said that, and fewer words, but she thought that it was just another thing that I was getting into that I wouldn't see through. But as I've been slowly bringing her back into the church and bringing the children into the church, she kind of realized it was something a bit more serious for me, and she thanked me for kind of bringing her back into it and giving her something that she'd fallen away from back in her life. We expect you, if you're a religious person, keep it to yourself. Be quiet about it, keep it to yourself. Don't let it affect the public sphere. And then there's that aspect of Christianity that says, no, be a witness, or profess the faith. You're told to profess the faith, not to keep it to yourself. But at the same time, you're told, the one who prays to be noticed will be humbled. The humble ones will be exalted. And so you have to find this middle ground between the two. I think there's a quote from Maya Angelou that when you know better, you can become better. And I think that's something that really sums up what it's been for me. I wanted to be that better person. I think I do really good acts in my professional life. I'm a police officer. I help people. I've saved lives. I've stopped offenders. And then there's the personal life where, what did I do? I mean, I would spend time with my family. Kind of half enthusiastically. There was a part of me that just kind of, played with the kids, and that was about it. But I wanted to be more for them, to be a role model for them, to have them be someone they can look at as they grow up and respect, and hopefully influence them to live better lives. So it was one of the major reasons that I kept coming back. It was really easy for me to go see someone's church and spend some time with them, and then just kind of, I've been in this comfortable position where I haven't had to do anything or challenge myself emotionally or spiritually for such a long time. It was easier to fall back into, I think I believe, but I'm not going to do anything right now. I mean, it took me almost 2 years to even start RCIA, much less follow through and finish everything. But when I finally decided on doing it, I did it in a large part so that I could be that better person. So when I first started what I would call this journey of finding God, I did begin with the Catholic Church when I spoke to my coworker Kenny, and I went with him to Mass a few times. And I had there's some other religious people in our department, and they talked to me and they said, I'm very happy that you're doing this thing. I'd like to invite you to mine as well, see if you like it. So I went to a few different places here. Went to like a New Agey church, a Baptist church, and then just like an Assembly of God. And there was something about them that just didn't click for me. I think coming back from being raised in Islam, which is a very, very traditional and very structured religion, there was something about Catholicism, as it is very structured, it's very traditional, and it's not up for interpretation, which to me, if it's the Word of God, it's not up for interpretation. If He said it, then He said it, and that's the rule. And so when you have varying beliefs within the church, or even in the same church, it changes from year to year, then it's hard for me to really get behind it. Aside from my middle child, Amelia, making the church laugh by waving to the Father upside down, when he broke, I think everybody broke at that point, but Um, I, even more so than my own baptism, I think it was my children's. It was like looking at them a little differently at that point. Even after I was baptized, I felt pretty different. Accomplished would be what I would say. I felt like I did something very good for the children after they were baptized and they were sealed. And they were very good for it. They weren't yelling or screaming or running around, at least during the ceremony part, not so much in the pews. But it was one of those feelings of accomplishment, that you did something right. I'd say my daily prayer life is less structured. It is just more of a spontaneous conversation with God. I do, however, try to get the rosary done every week. I try to get the rosary done every day, if I can manage the time uninterrupted with the kids, or I'll try to do it with the children as we set them down for bed, as they're calming down. I find it has a meditative effect as you sit there and as you recite the individual prayers and you reflect upon their meaning and what they're about. But I don't have a set time every day that I do it. I do it when I can. Often find when I'm working night shift, I was doing the rosary in the middle of my shift, so there's not much else to do. Catholic role models in my life would really fall to my godfather, Kenny Rodriguez, and the man who became the godfather for my children, Damien Poderberg. I work with both of them at the police department. Both of them spent time with me on my journey, kind of fighting over who would be my godfather in the beginning. And fortunately, or unfortunately, Kenny had more time to spend with me than Damien did in the beginning, so the task kind of fell to him to be there and to be the one that I would converse with and bounce ideas off of and just speak to, and I need to speak to somebody. But both of them, I found we had our differences as far as policing or personal life, or we had different hobbies, that kind of thing. But when it came to the spiritual life, both of them very pious people, as often as they can be jokey and carefree at work. When you ask them about certain topics, it's all piety, it's all solemnity. At this time in my life, going to Mass is very important to me. I've, during the RCIA process, once to injury, once to completely forgetting what day it was, I missed Mass. So twice in that 5-6 month period we were going, I missed it. I felt bad for a week. I really did. I even would go up to Sean, our catechist, and apologize, say, hey, Sean, I missed Mass on Sunday. I just completely lost track of time. Or one day my back was hurting and I really couldn't move for like 4 or 5 days. So I think I get a pass on that one. But now, no. I mean, there's plenty of options Saturday nights when I'm working Sunday mornings, but then we also have the center for the ESU students. They have a Sunday evening Mass in the event that I get held over at work and can't make Saturday night. So there's really no excuse anymore, and there's no reason to come up with one, because I thoroughly enjoy going to Mass and partaking in. Now I can receive communion, and I feel more whole with the community. I mean, it's a deeply pleasing thought to have that this all-powerful, all-knowing being who, if I was in his position, would probably care nothing for things so far beneath me, has such a vested interest in, my salvation, my eternal happiness, that he sent his only begotten Son to die for us, to forgive us our sins, so that we could join him in heaven for everlasting happiness. It's a comforting thought, is what it is. In dark times, you have something to look forward to, something to keep going for, keep you from giving up on even the smallest things.